The alarms at Prestige Gallery were screaming as billionaire art collector Harrison Whitfield casually walked toward the exit with a $50 million Monet tucked under his arm. "Sir, please stop," security guard Jerome Williams called out, stepping into the millionaire's path. "You can't remove that painting without authorization," Harrison laughed coldly. "Do you have any idea who I am, boy? I could buy this entire gallery and fire you before lunch." He had no idea he was talking to a former FBI agent with a Harvard law degree who was about to change both their lives forever. Before starting the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The Prestige Gallery on Fifth Avenue was Manhattan's most exclusive art venue, where billionaires and celebrities came to acquire masterpieces that cost more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. The gallery's reputation was built on discretion, impeccable service, and the kind of security that ensured priceless works of art remained exactly where they belonged. Jerome Williams had been working the evening shift at Prestige Gallery for exactly 4 months, a job he had taken while transitioning between careers. At 35, Jerome possessed a quiet dignity that made him nearly invisible to the wealthy patrons who frequented the gallery. They saw his security uniform and his dark skin and made immediate assumptions about his intelligence, his education, and his place in their world. What they didn't know was that Jerome Williams held a law degree from Harvard, had spent 8 years as an FBI special agent specializing in art crimes, and had personally recovered over $200 million worth of stolen cultural artifacts during his federal career. He had left the FBI 6 months earlier after his partner was killed in the line of duty, and he was still trying to figure out what came next in his life. The evening had started normally enough. Harrison Whitfield, one of New York's most prominent art collectors and the heir to a shipping fortune worth $3 billion, had arrived for a private viewing of the gallery's new Impressionist collection. Whitfield was known for his aggressive collecting methods and his belief that money could buy anything, including things that weren't officially for sale. Jerome had been watching Whitfield from across the gallery, noting the man's behavior with the trained eye of someone who had spent years studying criminal patterns. There was something about the way Whitfield lingered near certain pieces, the way he positioned himself between the paintings and the security cameras, and most importantly, the way he had disabled the motion sensors in the Monet section when he thought no one was looking. At 9:47 p.m., 15 minutes after the gallery had officially closed to the public, Harrison Whitfield made his move. He casually lifted the $50 million Monet water lily painting from its mount, tucked it under his arm like a newspaper, and walked toward the exit as if he owned the place, which, in his mind, he probably thought he did. That's when the alarms started screaming. "Sir, please stop," Jerome called out, stepping directly into Whitfield's path between the gallery's main exhibition hall and the exit. "You can't remove that painting without proper authorization and documentation." Harrison Whitfield looked at Jerome with the kind of contempt usually reserved for something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of one's shoe. At 58, Harrison had never been challenged by anyone he considered beneath his social station, and he certainly wasn't going to start taking orders from a black security guard. "Do you have any idea who I am, boy?" Harrison laughed coldly, using the racial epithet with casual cruelty. "I could buy this entire gallery and fire you before lunch. Now get out of my way before I have you arrested for interfering with a legitimate business transaction." Jerome remained perfectly calm, his posture relaxed but ready. "Sir, I'm going to need to see the purchase documentation for that painting, along with proper identification and authorization from gallery management." "Purchase documentation?" Harrison scoffed. "I don't need documentation. I'm Harrison Whitfield III. My family has been collecting art since before your people could even read." The racial insult hung in the air like toxic smoke, but Jerome's expression didn't change. He had heard worse during his FBI career, and he had learned long ago that the best response to ignorance was professional competence. "Mr. Whitfield," Jerome said quietly, "regardless of your family's collecting history, this gallery has specific protocols for art removal that apply to everyone. I'm going to need you to return the painting to its mount while we sort this out." Harrison's face flushed red with indignation. Are you accusing me of stealing? Do you understand that I donate more money to arts organizations in a single year than you'll make in your entire pathetic lifetime? Sir, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm following standard security protocols. If you have legitimate authorization to remove that painting, producing the documentation will clear this up immediately. That's when Harrison made his fatal mistake. Instead of producing documentation he didn't have, he decided to rely on intimidation and racial superiority. Listen to me very carefully, security boy, Harrison said, stepping closer to Jerome in what was clearly meant to be a threatening gesture. I am Harrison Whitfield III. My family owns shipping companies, real estate developments, and more art than most museums. I sit on the boards of 6 major cultural institutions. I could have you blacklisted from every security job in this city with a single phone call. Jerome nodded thoughtfully. That's very impressive, Mr. Whitfield, but you still need documentation to remove that painting. I don't need documentation, Harrison exploded. I need you to remember your place and get out of my way. What Harrison didn't notice in his rage was that Jerome had been quietly activating the gallery's advanced security system, which included silent alarms connected directly to the NYPD's Art Crime Division and real-time video recording of everything that was happening. Mr. Whitfield, Jerome said with the same calm professionalism, I understand you're frustrated, but I need you to understand something. This gallery is equipped with motion sensors, pressure-sensitive mounts, and cameras that record everything. When you removed that painting without authorization, you triggered multiple security protocols. So what? Harrison sneered. Call the police. Call the FBI. Call whoever you want. By the time they get here, you'll be unemployed, and I'll be filing charges against you for harassment and false imprisonment. Jerome smiled for the first time that evening. Actually, sir, they're already here. Harrison spun around to see 2 NYPD detectives and an FBI agent entering through the gallery's main entrance. The federal agent was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen this kind of arrogance before. Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Art Crime Team, she announced, showing her badge. Mr. Whitfield, we need to speak with you about the unauthorized removal of cultural artifacts. Harrison's confidence faltered for the first time. This is ridiculous. I'm a legitimate collector. This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding. Sir, Agent Chen said calmly, we've been investigating irregularities in your recent acquisitions for the past 6 months. We have evidence suggesting that several pieces in your private collection were obtained through fraudulent means. Jerome watched as Harrison's face went through a remarkable transformation from arrogant confidence to growing panic. That's impossible, Harrison stammered. I have purchased documentation for everything in my collection. Documentation that our forensic accountants have determined to be falsified, Agent Chen replied. Mr. Whitfield, you're under arrest for attempted theft of cultural property, fraud, and money laundering. As the handcuffs clicked around Harrison's wrists, he stared at Jerome with hatred and disbelief. This is all your fault, Harrison hissed. You could have just looked the other way like any normal security guard would have. Jerome shook his head sadly. Mr. Whitfield, a normal security guard would have done exactly what I did. The difference is, you assumed I wasn't qualified to recognize criminal behavior when I saw it. What do you mean, qualified? Harrison demanded. Agent Chen answered for Jerome. Mr. Whitfield, meet former FBI Special Agent Jerome Williams. He spent 8 years with our art crime team and has personally recovered more stolen art than any agent in bureau history. He's the one who identified the patterns in your collecting that led to our investigation. Harrison's legs almost gave out. Your FBI? Former FBI, Jerome corrected. I left the bureau 6 months ago, but once you're trained to spot art theft, you never really stop seeing it. But you're just a security guard. Jerome looked at Harrison with something that might have been pity. Mr. Whitfield, I took this job because I needed time to figure out what I wanted to do next with my life. I never intended to work another art crime case, But when you started tampering with those motion sensors 3 weeks ago, when you began photographing paintings from suspicious angles, when you asked detailed questions about the gallery's insurance policies, well, old habits die hard. Agent Chen added, Jerome contacted us about your suspicious behavior 2 weeks ago. Tonight was just the culmination of our investigation. As Harrison was led away, he made one final attempt to salvage his dignity. You'll never work in this city again, he shouted at Jerome. I have connections everywhere. I'll destroy your life. Jerome watched the millionaire being escorted to a federal transport vehicle, then turned to Agent Chen. Sarah, thanks for responding so quickly. Are you kidding? When Jerome Williams calls about art theft, we drop everything. Have you thought about coming back to the bureau? We could really use you. Jerome shook his head. I'm still not ready for that, but this evening has reminded me why I love the work. What will you do now? Jerome looked around the gallery, at the priceless works of art that would remain safe because he had done his job with integrity and professionalism. I think I might have some ideas. 3 days later, Jerome received a call from Isabella Prestige, the gallery's owner and one of the most respected figures in the international art world. Mr. Williams, she said, I understand we have you to thank for preventing a major theft and exposing a criminal operation that could have affected galleries worldwide. I was just doing my job, Ms. Prestige. Actually, you were doing far more than your job required, which is why I'd like to offer you a different position. How would you feel about becoming our Director of Security and Authenticity? The position would involve overseeing security for all our galleries, consulting on art authentication, and working with law enforcement agencies to prevent art crimes. Jerome was quiet for a moment. Ms. Prestige, that sounds like exactly the kind of challenge I've been looking for. The salary is $200,000 annually, plus benefits, plus a percentage of any recovered stolen art we help identify. And Jerome? No more security guard uniforms. You'll be working directly with collectors, museums, and law enforcement agencies around the world. 6 months later, Jerome Williams was featured on the cover of Art and Antiques magazine as the detective who's revolutionizing art security. The article detailed how his unique combination of FBI training and street-level security experience was helping galleries and museums worldwide protect their collections from increasingly sophisticated thieves. The biggest mistake criminals make, Jerome explained in the interview, is assuming that the person in the security uniform doesn't have the training or intelligence to catch them. They see what they expect to see, and they miss what's actually there. Harrison Whitfield, meanwhile, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for art theft, fraud, and money laundering. The investigation into his collection revealed that over 40 pieces worth more than $500 million had been stolen or obtained through fraudulent means. During his sentencing hearing, Harrison made a final statement that revealed how little he had learned from the experience. Your Honor, he said, I was entrapped by a security guard who should have known his place. This entire case is based on the testimony of someone whose job it was to protect me, not investigate me. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Chen, Agent Chen's sister, responded with words that became widely quoted in law enforcement circles. Mr. Whitfield, you seem to believe that a person's value and competence are determined by their job title or their appearance. The man who caught you breaking the law has dedicated his life to protecting cultural treasures that belong to all of humanity. You, despite your wealth and social position, decided to steal those same treasures for your personal gratification. The question isn't why he investigated you. The question is how someone with your advantages chose to become a criminal. Jerome used his newfound position and platform to establish the Williams Foundation for Art Crime Prevention, which provided scholarships for young people from underrepresented communities to study art history, law enforcement, and museum security. Everyone deserves the chance to protect and preserve culture, Jerome said at the foundation's launch. Art doesn't belong to the wealthy. It belongs to everyone, and everyone should have the opportunity to be part of protecting it. 5 years after the arrest, Jerome was appointed as the FBI's Director of International Art Crime Prevention, making him one of the youngest and most accomplished people ever to hold the position. In his acceptance speech, Jerome reflected on the night that changed everything. "I learned something important from Harrison Whitfield," he said. "I learned that prejudice doesn't just hurt the people it targets, it blinds the people who practice it." Whitfield was so convinced that a black security guard couldn't possibly be a threat to his criminal enterprise that he ignored all the obvious signs that he was being investigated. But more importantly, I learned that every job, no matter how humble it might seem to others, is an opportunity to serve with integrity. Whether you're a security guard, an FBI agent, or anything in between, what matters is not what people think about your position. It's how you choose to use that position to make the world a little bit better. The story of Jerome Williams became required reading in criminal justice programs across the country, not just as an example of excellent police work, but as a lesson about the danger of assumptions and the power of treating every person with respect. Isabella Prestige, whose gallery had been saved by Jerome's intervention, established an annual award in his honor for security professionals who go above and beyond their duties to protect cultural heritage. "Jerome taught us all something valuable," she said at the first award ceremony. "He taught us that the most important qualifications for any job aren't found on a resume. They're found in a person's character, their integrity, and their commitment to doing what's right, regardless of whether anyone important is watching." The Harrison Whitfield case became a landmark in art crime prosecution, but its larger significance was as a reminder that criminal behavior can exist at any level of society, and that the people best equipped to stop it might be the ones you'd least expect. Jerome Williams proved that heroism doesn't require a badge or a title. It just requires the courage to do the right thing when the right thing needs to be done. "The most dangerous criminals," Jerome would tell his students at the FBI Academy, "are the ones who believe their wealth or social status makes them untouchable. But the most effective law enforcement officers are the ones who understand that justice doesn't care about your bank account, it only cares about your actions." Years later, when asked about the moment that launched his extraordinary career, Jerome always gave the same answer. "I was just doing my job. The only difference was that I refused to let someone else's prejudices determine how well I did it." Harrison Whitfield had tried to steal a $50 million painting, but what he actually lost was far more valuable: his freedom, his reputation, and his illusion that money could buy him immunity from the consequences of his actions. Jerome Williams had been dismissed as just a security guard, but what he actually was turned out to be priceless: a dedicated professional whose commitment to justice changed not just his own life, but the entire field of art crime prevention. If this story touched your heart, remember that every person you encounter, regardless of their job title, their appearance, or their apparent circumstances, has the potential to surprise you with their knowledge, their capabilities, and their character. The next time you're tempted to judge someone based on their uniform or their position, remember Jerome Williams. Remember that true security doesn't come from looking down on others. It comes from recognizing that everyone deserves respect, and that the person you dismiss today might be the one whose integrity saves you tomorrow. And remember that the most rewarding careers are often built not on seeking recognition or status, but on doing excellent work with dignity and letting that excellence speak for itself. Because in the end, what matters isn't what people think you can do, it's what you actually do when the moment comes to act. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.